Also, what's your opinion on adapting the workout or adapting the entire training program based on the region that you are? I'm just speaking specifically for a professional right now because, as you know, in Asia or the Middle East or in Latin America, it's very individualistic. It's one-on-one, a lot of one-on-one skill-based stuff. Like you're not really coming off of pin downs, you're not really running a lot of plays in those regions. Whereas if you go to Europe, you're going to be running different sets, different options, counters, all types of stuff. So it's going to be, in general, let's say, it's going to be a lot less dribbling and a lot more of like working without the ball and catch and shoot type of movements. So do you think that there would be a benefit in, like, say there's someone who's going to Asia? Do you think there's a benefit if I came to you and I said, Korey, I'm going to play in the CBA in China? Do you think there's a benefit in being like, okay, the whole hour or the whole hour and a half, it's going to be really focused on me getting in my bag? And that way you're kind of like neglecting that other aspect of your game, though, about like catch and shoot and working without the ball, and it's a lot more one-on-one. And then vice versa, if I was going to Europe, I would maybe come to you and be like, hey, Coach Korey, I want to work on coming off of pin downs, a lot of catch and shoot, a lot of flare screens, stuff like that, and a bit less of one-on-one thing. Do you think there is a benefit in that, or do you think that as a player you should be always working on your entire package, your entire game, regardless of where you're headed?
Jay, that's super insightful. That's an amazing question. And I will say that I made a huge mistake on that before 2020 or 2019, right? For maybe like the first 10 to 11 years of just my skill development and coaching career, I had no clue of anything even remotely close to what you're talking about. But once I took the time to obviously, relocate, move to China, spent that time in the CBA and just gained so much exposure to the different styles of basketball, it opened my mind to start thinking about how I could better serve my players. Before that, I had only been exposed to EuroLeague players or players who played in maybe starter leagues within Europe. My first professional client was 10 to 12 years older than me, had played overseas for a decade, and he was a big man. And so I only got the knowledge and information that he passed to me in his finite experience. So then going to the other side of the globe and being in Asia and working with guys like Joe Young, like I mentioned in our recent interview, Andrew Harrison and Epe Udo and now Trae Golden, like I started seeing, okay, these guys really aren't playing your conventional team style of basketball. So how does that work into how I help develop players today? Well, first off, I'll say this: on the pro level, region wide, like it doesn't matter if they're in Europe or Asia, triple threat is a whole different, you have to teach it a whole different way, right? And so that was one way that I was fumbling the bag earlier on in those beginning years, that first decade of teaching players. I had no idea of even like how to change their style of footwork, right? And then now appropriating that within the concept of what the teams expect of them. Trae Golden, for instance, he's going to have the ball in his hands 90% of the time. Like, I'm sure if I go look up his usage rate right now in the CBA for Sichuan, it's probably like higher than LeBron's, James Harden's, Luka Doncic. Like, it's ridiculous. But that's the style of most CBA players, like Marshawn Brooks and whoever else you want to name, right? So in his workouts, we've got two guys on the ball. We're blitzing him if we work on ball screens every single time, right? We're hitting him with pads. We're swinging the blocking sticks. We're trying our best to make sure that he feels like he's in a CBA game, if that makes sense. Whereas when I work with the Sahar brothers, Dory, Lord, I don't want to forget all their names, but these were great brothers. They're all from Israel, and they play for Tel Aviv, Maccabi Tel Aviv, right? So they're shooters. One's a playmaker, and the other one was like a defender, right? But they're all coming off flares and pin downs, and if they're not coming off of it, they have to make a play for one of their teammates coming off of it. So, yes, they may want to work on one-on-one moves, and as a coach, I have to make sure that I keep them invested in the workout and make sure that there's an element of joy. But for 10 minutes, I'm sprinkling that in, right? Whereas with Trae, that's pretty much all we're doing. If in Trae Golden's workout, we want to work on catch and shoot threes, we're doing that after he drives to the basket, jumps in the air, gets fouled by three people, kicks it out, and then has to relocate for a catch and shoot three. because the ball is just always coming back to him. If he passes it out of a blitz, it's boomeranging right back to him. So, just having a better understanding of the way that the game is played in these different regions helps the players to have more trust in you as a coach, and also believe that they've had a more efficient off season. And even if it's in season training that you're doing, but they're going to take a lot more pride in it, and they own it, right? There's more accountability from the player themselves, because they can see this is how I feel when I play. And, now my workout makes more sense.
Yeah, that's amazing insight, because I remember when I played and I first came to Latin America, I came from a college system where our coach was basically, it was like we were playing football. Like every play was a play call. Every play was some set. Like there was no freedom. We're running this pin down screen. We're running this double floppy. We're running Spanish horns. We're doing everything. And then when I went to El Salvador, that was my first location, my first stop, it was complete opposite. Zero ball movement, just maybe a pick and roll, spread it out, and you just give it to your imports and they work and they go pick and roll and they double and then you play out of that. And then for a while it worked. And then I remember we went to the finals, and then once you get higher up into the teams, they obviously get better players. So then I started being guarded by an import, a Cuban. He was a national team player. He was like 6'6", 6'7". I'm 6'2", and he's guarding me on the wing, and I couldn't get a shot off on him. And I really hadn't. I realized I really hadn't worked on my one-on-one game throughout my entire career, because I just I was a good shooter. I practiced shooting all my life. I had a knack for shooting. And then once it got to that scenario, I realized, man, I really can't really go one-on-one that much unless it's against an inferior defender, and I can't really use a pick. So then that was a moment that really clicked up in my head, because I'd been playing one way my whole life, and then I thought man, I'm already here. This is where you're gonna get paid. This is where your market is right now. So I had this purist idea of what is basketball. Basketball is 5 players touching the ball. Everyone's moving. Everyone's in sync. You're all working together. And then I saw this professional game, and then I saw it in these different regions too. And I was like, oh, they play like that in the Middle East. Oh, they play like that in many of the parts of South America. Oh, they play like that in a lot of parts of Asia. So it's really interesting, because you as a player have to always kind of have that balance and act between, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into one role, but at the same time, you also have to understand, how are you getting paid? Where is your future? Is this your market? Because if that's where it is, then I would say, in my opinion, my advice would be to focus and double down more on that. Just like what you were doing with your client. He's going through a lot of picks. He's getting doubled. He's getting bumped. He's relocating, because that's what it takes. And they don't care if you're an American and you're like, oh, I'm not used to doing that. I just want to. They don't care. They'll find someone else who can do that, who can play that way, and who's going to get 25. So, that's really kind of refreshing to hear that you say that, because I think that's something that a lot of people, a lot of skills trainers don't even realize. They don't even know that. And they're training players a certain way, but they don't realize, they don't really specify it to the region in which they're playing. So that's really interesting that you say that.
And you have to, if you really want to serve your players at a higher level. Like I said, I realize now that many of the times that I failed players, and that's not to say I didn't have energy. It's not to say that I didn't care or I didn't prepare. It's just, our people perish for a lack of knowledge, right? That's a word that's written that we can never, fight against or argue. That's a principle we can stand on in life in general, right? Life is harder when you don't have information. So, just the simple exposure of the job that I was blessed to receive, it completely changed how I approach everyone that I deal with now. So even NBA players, between NBA and G League are vastly different. I would say the G League is a lot more like your up and down, fast paced, kind of just barn burning style of basketball. A lot of shots getting put up, is survival of the fittest, because it's hard for a team to create chemistry. You normally have roster changes throughout the season, just like overseas. And then you have guys getting sent down from the parent team in the NBA who are on two-way. So these are like your imports, because they're going to get the most shots. They're going to have the higher usage rate. And if you're just a straight G League guy, making $50,000 a month, you got to be a lot more efficient, but you still got to be a dog and try to figure out a way to last. and not get cut. So when I work with a G League guy versus an NBA guy, sometimes that's drastically different depending on their situation. So you're exactly right, Jay.